everybody. Today's class is on roses. Normally we have this class a little bit later in the season. We decided to go a little bit earlier. This is good. It'll give you a chance to prepare a little bit before the roses come in. But we do have some already. They're not in bloom yet, so you'll notice normally when I do this class there's a lot of color behind me. But we did a little bit on the early side this year. As Lisa said, roses tend to be a little intimidating. If you've ever tried to read a book on roses or ask someone how to do it, it makes it seem so complicated. I never understood why. The particularly pruning, what in the world? It makes it very, very complicated. So we just want to simplify that. Roses are just a wonderful shrub to have in the yard. They're actually my personal favorite. I'm just attached to roses. I love them. They kind of answer all of your needs when it comes to a flowering shrub. It's a long-term bloomer, repeat bloomer, lots of color, big blooms that you can't get off of most shrubs. Easy care. I find most people tend to baby their roses to death. Actually, that's really not necessary. They're super resilient. They'll survive almost anything, except excess care, mainly the watering. So we'll make all of this, we'll show how simple this really can be. They're super resilient shrubs. To keep them looking their best, they do need some regular care, some deadheading, looking after bugs, but for the most part, it's not overly complicated. So we just want to simplify all of that and let you see how easy this really can be. So let's go ahead and start off with the pruning. You'll notice that some of these are pruned up and cut back. We have some roses that came in dormant that are kind of started already. So that you see they're not leafed out or anything. So the pruning, the once-a-year pruning, the first question that I always get is when to do it. A lot of you came from warmer climates and you were always told do it in the fall. Here, because it's colder, we wait till spring, generally late March is the safest time to do it. I know you're going to see leaves. You're going to see leaves and you're thinking, oh, I can't prune it if it's already leafed out, right? Not the case. It won't hurt it. Don't be afraid to cut when there's leaves on there. It's okay. The reason why we do it that way is because what will happen is you'll have a rose. Again, we're in a cold climate, very cold. 20s are very common at night in the winter, very, very common. This past week, we've been in the 20s the whole time. Teens are pretty common, especially late December, early January. And we'll often, almost pretty much every year, we'll have a dip where we go into either single digits or even zero. I have seen it go below. Some parts of Arizona, you expect them to go below zero every year for a certain amount of time, depending on your elevation. Prescott, we're on the mountainside. And if you're on the west side of Prescott, it's colder than the east side because of the way the town is shaped. So some of you will definitely see that more often than others. So because of that freezing, during the winter, the canes will actually die back a bit. They'll get damaged or they'll die back. A lot of the cane will have discoloration. It's still alive, but it's damaged. You'll see blackening, all kinds of funky colors going on in there. So what will happen is when you go and prune, you'll prune, the first thing you're going to do is cut out all of the damaged parts. And then what is left, you'll go ahead and shape. You'll take out more canes if necessary, bring it down to size. And then if you do it too early, then you've already shortened the shrub and now it's going to die back further. And this can do permanent damage, even kill your shrub, especially if it is grafted. And this is a grafted example. Here's the graft right here. You can see the stump comes up and then there's sort of a knob. That's a graft. most of the roses, especially the hybrid teas and the climbers, are grafted onto a rootstock that does best in our soil. They're grafted onto Dr. Huey, which is a red rose, a very resilient, hardy rose. And let me pull this out so you can see. So because they're grafted, you don't want any growth coming out of the base. So there's been cases where it died back to the graft, but the base stayed alive, shot out some stems, but it wasn't the color that you had bought. So you're wondering why you're getting red roses. It's because they're coming out below the graft. That's Dr. Huey. So you just want to protect that graft. If you have the rose in a particularly exposed area, you've had some issues with certain things like roses getting damaged, you can mulch over the graft, but the mulch must stay dry. If the mulch is wet, it will rot the graft, kill the rose. So you don't want to have anything wet against that graft. So if you want to plant right now, you could. And even though it's getting pretty cold at night, the soil actually retains its heat pretty well. It has to be cold for long periods of time in order to actually freeze the soil itself and anything within a few inches of it. So you can plant these right now, even though you see these are pretty short. You can give them some added protection. If you're planting one of these dormant ones, you can give them some added protection, especially if you're on that west side, by, again, putting some mulch over it. It can be straw, it can be the premium mulch, it can be whatever, as long as it's dry. So that's okay. Some of you are in Prescott Valley. Again, it's a little bit warmer. We actually have our customers come from all over northern Arizona, so we've got almost everything but Flagstaff. Some of that area belongs to Warner's, so they're a pretty good nursery up there, so they take good care of that area. So let me bring this over here. This is a shrub rose, actually. This particular one is called Knockout. Gorgeous, gorgeous rose. With this one, the pruning is going to be a little bit different. These usually are not grafted. So there's a little less to worry about with pruning these. You're not going to have all of the cane pruning that you do with the other types of roses. Generally with this one, you just take out whatever's damaged, whatever's dead, and then just sort of shape it. You'll notice there's one out in our parking lot, right next to, facing this way. It's going to be on your right side. You'll see some cane sticking out of the ground. It's got a denser structure, more branchy, so you just kind of shape it, clean it up, and leave it be. Very, very simple if you want something that you don't really have to get in there with the loppers and have to do a lot of work with. And they bloom like crazy, and that's the wonderful thing about them. They have a nice shrubby appearance, dense, mounding, instead of having the long canes coming up. Yes?
How tall do they get?
Most of the shrub roses only get about 4 feet tall, approximately, a little different between each one. This particular one is Knockout. I believe it's right about 4 feet. A question I always get is, what is that blooming downtown at the Courthouse Square or at the Fry's parking lot? That's a meadowland. They make clusters of small roses, generally in red or scarlet. They come in a few different colors, but those are the most common. Beautiful, beautiful rose. People ask me all the time what that is. It's meadowland. It's an old rose from, I think, at the 1800s, and very hardy, beautiful, easy rose. It just is.
Could you spell that?
Meidel. A&D or E&D? I can't remember. I think it's A&D. This right here is the lady base. This is that rose that's down in Tucson, world's biggest rose. This is it. It's a climbing rose. You just need some kind of support, an arbor, a trellis. This is another one that doesn't really require a lot of blooming. It doesn't have as many thick canes, at least not at first. So if you've seen the one in Tombstone, then you know after a while they do. They get pretty woody. But they remain very, very bushy. And lots of foliage, actually evergreen. doesn't lose very many leaves in the winter. So this is something, if you want a climber that isn't going to be bare sticks in the winter, this is a great one. This is the lady base. Makes small flowers like this, but lots of them. It's just covered in either white or yellow flowers like a bridal veil. Absolutely gorgeous. And it's kind of a wild rose, so super easy care. Be careful not to overwater and give it mildew. So very, very easy. Give it plenty of sun and a place to climb, and they will get very, very thick. So make sure your arbor is strong with these.
What's it called?
It's called Lady Bakes.
Lady Base?
Mm-hmm. Lady Bakes.
Thanks.
Yes. Okay. So as far as the pruning goes, what we'll do, let's take this one here. The first thing you want to do is remove anything dead or damaged. Take all of that out. And then when you're done, take a look. And what you want to do is take out crossing canes. You can see these canes are kind of crossing against each other, and they're actually against each other. Take those out. They're not good for each other. Take one of those out. Take out anything that's sort of growing inward. Now in this case it's a climber, so we can kind of give it a little leeway, but generally, like for example this one right here, you see it actually is growing towards the center of the bush. That's probably one you would take out right there, especially in a hybrid tea, a bush shrub rose.
It's big too. I mean, it's going all the way to the top.
Yeah, and this is a climber, so it's going to get much taller. It is. So again, here's a couple of canes that are right against each other. So one of those we would want to take out. When given a choice, always take up the older canes. You want to take out your oldest canes. They're thick and they're woody. It's easy to tell which one. So we've got these two canes right here that are kind of competing against each other. We would take out this big, thick one. That's the older one. So let's see. When you prune, you want to find a leaf bud. You can see there's leaves already sprouting out. Sometimes if they're still real small, they might just be tiny, but you can see there's a little leaf bud there. Pick one that is pointing outward. Okay? So for example, see this one right here, for example, I know it's really small, but it's got a leaf bud that's pointing towards the center of the bush. That's not the one that we want to leave at the top. We would want to go down to the next one that's pointing outward. So always the topmost bud on the stem should be the one pointing outward, so that's how you know where to cut. So it's pretty, you can see it's not too bad. It's just, you don't want things going inward because that's just going to sort of get in the way of other canes, and it doesn't give it a nice shape. Take out anything dead and damaged, anything that's sort of crossing or bumping up against each other. Take one of those out so that everybody has a little more room to grow. Yes?
Does the angle of the cut matter?
Yeah, generally a 45 degree cut is best.
And will it grow from the cut side more than, will it,
Oh,
this is the outside and you cut it like that, it's going to grow like that or not?
yeah, I mean, either one will actually work. Different gardeners will have their own opinion on whether it should go out or in. Generally, they'll say kind of leave the upper part of the slant with the leaf bud, but you'll get different opinions. But generally, that's what they'll say. Okay, so the pruning, like I said, that's generally the scariest part of growing roses. Just kind of shape it up after that. When you're done, you want to have between 3 and 5 canes. If you want to have more roses, go ahead with 5. That will just have, the shrub will have a lot more on it. But if you limit it to more like 3, it'll have fewer roses on the shrub, but they'll be bigger. It'll just make the blossoms larger, especially if you're growing the roses for cutting and you want to take them inside, put them in a vase, then it's a good idea to go fewer. But if you want to look at the shrub itself covered in flowers, you may prefer to go with 5. So when you're done, just keep going, using those rules until you're down to 3 or 5.
So how many canes are on that one?
This one, how many canes are on this one? Too many at the moment. There's canes all over the place, and a lot of them are crossing, growing inward. I mean, look at this. We've got this one growing inward, and this one's against this one. And they're just going all over the place. So, definitely we would use those rules to thin this out until we were down to 3 or 5. So, like I said, take out first dead and damaged. Take out your oldest canes, crossing canes, inward growing canes, until you're down to the 3 best or the 5 best.
So I do have a question.
Mhm.
You're gonna take out the oldest cane.
Mm-hmm.
I see this is touching, this is crossing, would you take this?
Yes, I would take that one out. Yeah, I would take that one out, the big one, and I would also take this one here, these 3 canes here. I don't know how much is showing up on the video. Sorry guys if you can't see it, but there's 3 canes here that are all just kind of bunched together. So we would take out the one that's inward growing, this one right here, and we would take out this big thick cane here.
Even though there's a really nice cane on top of it.
Yes.
That's,
Roses, they're constantly growing more canes and growing longer canes, so don't worry that you're taking out a really big cane. It's okay. Just go ahead and take out what you can. Here this is an old cane, but it's got some fresh ones coming out. But you can see even that cane that's attached to it, you can see it's pretty thick. And when they get woody like that, they have less foliage on them, less flowers. The younger canes are going to look nicer, look better. Otherwise, you're just going to have this big woody bunch of stalks after a while. Okay, any questions about the pruning? Did I explain it well enough?
Are you going to prune anything off the top?
Yes, after you've kind of shortened, you've taken out a lot of canes at that point, and then just kind of shape what's left, bring it down, consider how much it grows. It'll put on a couple feet a year. So go ahead and take it down to a reasonable height so that it has some grow room to get to its full height again. You can actually take them pretty far down. You can see here they've gone pretty far, but you would not want to do this too early in the year. I've seen people do stuff like this in the fall and killed the roses. They never came back at all in the spring. I wouldn't normally take them down this far. This is a pretty small, young plant. I would generally leave a little more on them. It does also depend on where you have them. Is it a climbing rosy you want to get real tall, or a grandiflora? Is it something you want to keep shapely in a pot? If it's in a pot, you'll probably go even shorter than the ones you would go with outside. Yes?
I have 7 hedge roses, and they have little tiny yellow roses,
Okay.
and they drive me nuts. They're very thorny,
Okay.
and I have to trim them every 2 weeks because they get these big things.
Okay. Yeah, you've got a very fast growing rose there.
Yeah, well, how can
I would say,
lessen my burden?
when you trim, how much do you take off? Just what has grown in the past couple of weeks?
Well, no, I try to take it down,
Okay.
but
Okay.
it's wild.
Yeah, it sounds like you have something that's either a wild rose or related to one.
Well, you planted it. but
Okay.
The whole landscape was done by waters.
Okay.
I don't mean personally.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it is, but it's like hard to
Okay.
control.
So, yeah, that's going to be one of those cases where you don't need to be afraid to take off quite a lot.
Maybe I should go down and take out the canes now that they're,
How closely planted are they together, I wonder?
the what?
If they were planted, a lot of times we'll plant things
Oh.
close together just so that
No,
they fill in
it's,
space. Okay, it's just a large
I have
rose.
an acre, so it's a lot of,
Okay,
they're not really close together.
okay. So they're just huge and fast growing.
They're very huge.
Okay. Basically, you're going to have to take off, it sounds like you're taking off as much as you can and they just keep growing back.
I'm thinking now in
Yeah.
March, maybe I can get down there
Yeah.
and take out some of them.
Yeah, absolutely, cut back
Canes.
severe. It'd be severe during your March pruning.
Okay.
If they're
All right.
growing like that, don't be afraid to get a head start on those things.
Yeah, I was almost gonna take them out until I saw the flower. They're like, okay, you're worth it.
Again, if they're leafed out or even blooming, you can still do pretty heavy pruning. Just don't do it too late in the
They
year.
get like, it's almost like a willow thing, you know?
Yeah. And it could be, do you remember what it was called?
No, that's why I'm asking you.
Maybe
It's,
there's some old records somewhere.
it could be that it's in our records
You
depending
know,
on how long
actually,
ago.
I do I have a blueprint of the landscape, and I'm sure it's on there, I should look.
Okay. Yeah, it partially might depend on whether it was a climbing rose, because they certainly would flop over a lot more.
It is,
Okay.
yeah.
So supporting it would just keep it from flopping and going all over the place.
Yeah, I have a trellis on each.
Yeah. If it's a climbing rose, what you'll want to do is prune it out real good in March.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And then as they grow, you'll need to tie it up. The thing about climbing roses is that they actually don't climb. They're not natural climbers. They're ramblers. They just kind of do
That's
this.
what it is.
That's what they do. They just kind of flop on the ground and ramble around on the ground, almost like it's trying to be a ground cover or something. So they drape naturally.
Yeah.
We turn them into climbing roses by tying them or weaving them through a trellis. So don't expect it to do that on its own. So you're going to have to go out there, and as they grow, just keep tying them to the trellis and do it that way. Because of the type of rose you have, it is going to be very floppy and very fast growing. That's just the nature of these
Okay.
climbers. So yeah, it sounds like what you really need is a taller trellis or a taller fence. Are they along the
Yeah,
fence?
they're on trellises up against a wall.
Okay.
It's on wall.
Okay, they're just not attaching to the trellis.
They are,
Okay,
but I don't like them coming over the wall.
I see. Generally with climbers, they'll go up the trellis, and then when they get to a point where they're either not being tied up or they've just run out of trellis, they sort of flop over. If you look at pictures of old world gardens,
That they stick,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know about how many thorns are going to be on something when you buy it?
Yeah, the roses do tend to be thorny.
It is,
yeah.
it hurts me a lot.
Yeah, you'll want some long-handled loppers
Okay.
or a landscaper. Make him do it.
Nice long rose gloves.
I
Yeah, long rose
understand
gloves.
that.
We do sell long rose gloves. They have a leather cuff that comes up to the elbow. And then we also have, get yourself a pair of long-handled loppers so that you can get in there without having to get your hands in there. That's just, those are two things that are going to save you when you've got big old rose bushes. Because boy, they can get thick and long and just be a hassle.
Okay, I'll
Yes.
be more.
So yes, absolutely. Get some long-handled loppers and some long-cuffed rose gloves, and that right there will save you a world of headache. As for throwing the canes away, you'll probably have to throw them directly into the dumpster or into a box. If you've ever tried to shove something thorny into a trash bag, it doesn't work. So you save a cardboard box if you know your pruning time is coming up, and throw them in there. It makes it a lot easier. All right.
That
So
helped a lot, thank you.
yes.
Is there a difference between a rambler and a climber?
Not really. The question was, is there a difference between a rambler and a climber? Now, there is something called the ground cover rose, which is entirely different. The climbers, they are ramblers. Like I said, we call them climbers because that's what we use them for. Now, there's one called the ground cover rose, which it's very, very much like the shrub rose. Dense, bushy, smaller leaves, more branches, green canes instead of big woody ones.
Has it got a lot of prickers maybe?
It's got little tiny ones, yes. It's got little tiny thorns.
What do you
But it's just like a shrub, only smaller.
the landscape?
They call it a ground cover rose or a carpet rose. It's basically just a low-growing mound. Only gets a couple feet tall, maybe 3 feet at the most for the real big ones.
Trying to identify some roses on my property. That is me.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Same with the lady banks. By nature, it is a grounder. It will just grow all over the ground. You could put it on a slope, and actually, it would be very pretty. This particular one, again, these can be until they've grown out more. They'll be a little bit leggy, but as she said, you know, they get bushier. But you can actually put them on a slope and let them drape down. And they can actually be very pretty that way. Yes?
There's a rose on my street that when it's coming in, it's a lovely peach color and then it gets red.
Okay.
And it's beautiful and I find out what it is.
The question is, how do you find out which rose is this particular one? There's something like 100,000 kinds of roses.
That do that have the peach color and then turn red.
Yeah, there are roses that change color. The blossom will start off right when it opens. It'll be one color, and then it'll fade to another color, and then sometimes even to another as they're going through their lifespan before finally fading and dropping. So there are roses that will change color, and if you're looking through the catalogs, it will say that. It will say starts off lavender and turns tan, or starts off peach and turns red. It will say that in the description. Where to start? That's going to be a little difficult. Talk to Cheryl. She's really good at knowing a lot of varieties of roses. Like I said, I think the last count was somewhere over 100,000 different varieties of roses. So there's so many possibilities. It's not like you're going to pick up one catalog and it's all going to be in there. There's different rose companies and different breeders that have made all these different hybrids or have licensed all these different hybrids. And sometimes if you can narrow it down, you can find out, but it can be a little difficult. I would say start with Cheryl and see if she knows.
Like I had some roses in there that bloomed all summer, they were white.
Yeah, that's the great thing about roses is they generally bloom all or most of the summer. If it gets really, really hot, most of them will take a break. I don't know how hot it got in Denver, but if it gets hot enough, they will take a break until it cools down a little bit, and then they'll start blooming again. Especially in June, you know how it can get in June. We start getting over 100 degrees, or about 100 degrees, and that's when you'll see some of the roses. Okay, I'm not gonna bloom as much, or what they'll do sometimes is they'll try to bloom, and you'll see the blossoms just dry up in the heat. The petals are just too delicate, and they'll look kind of singed on the ends, just sort of a brown, light brown color on the edges of the petals, and they won't look pretty. Some roses will just try to take a break altogether. It just depends.
Are you going to talk about mildew and these
Yes.
other bugs and things?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, I'm about to move on to mildew and bugs and things. You can see I brought in a few different products. No, you don't have to use all of them. I know I brought a lot. I'm just going to show you some options that will work for those things. Let's start with with watering. And the reason why I want to go into watering before mildew is because quite often the mildew is caused by a watering issue. Roses need plenty of sunlight. If they're not getting enough sunlight, that will encourage mildew and fungus. So don't try to put them in shady spots, it just doesn't work. And usually they try to lean for the light and they look funny anyway. So try to put them in nice sunny spots. They need plenty of light. That makes them healthy, it helps them grow right, and also it suppresses fungal spores. And then the second thing you want to do is water, usually for most of us, on a weekly basis. Some of you, because you have that dense clay and you've got wheat cloth and gravel on top, the soil doesn't dry out, only in the most extreme weather. So for some of you, you might even go less than that. Check your soil before you water. We do have a climate that tends to trick us. We have such dry heat here. We're not, now Prescott's not the hottest spot. We get up to 100, we kind of flirt with it a little bit. That's about it most of the time. Other parts of northern Arizona will get hotter. So whenever we're feeling hot, we often think, oh, the roses and the plants outside must need water. It's hot, sometimes it's windy. We're drying out, they must be too. This is very deceiving because we have a very dense clay. And that clay holds water like you would not believe. So if you're watering deeply enough, you will not have to water frequently. Generally, when I say deeply, here's what will often happen with people who are trying to figure out their irrigation. They'll turn on the water, and after a while, it starts pooling. So you turn it off thinking the soil must be saturated. Our soil just doesn't absorb fast enough. That's all it really is. It's actually still dry, but you've got to turn the water onto a lower flow so that's not pooling. Just real light trickle. That way the soil has time to absorb it as it comes out. A lot of you have drip systems. That's great, because the drip system can release the water slowly enough so that the soil can absorb it. But you're going to have to run it for a nice long time. These systems are only emitting a couple gallons an hour, a few gallons an hour. So that means if you only run it for a few minutes, it's only putting a few ounces of water onto the soil. That's not even soaking in more than an inch or two. So what'll happen is the soil underneath is dry after running the system for, say, 15 minutes. Maybe the topmost roots of the plant will get a sip of water. And they'll perk up, and maybe they were wilting, you'll see them perk up. Then that soil dries out really quick, and by the next day they're wilting again. So then you get into this habit of turning the system every day, or maybe every other day. I've seen that a lot. Watering probably accounts for 99% of the problems we see come in here. It's actually that much of an issue. So if you want to fix that problem, you'll want to turn that water on for longer periods of time. Drip systems were meant to run in increments of hours, not minutes. A lot of you have heard this spiel from us before. Like I said, most of the problems that we see in this area with dying plants or sickly plants has to do with the watering. So that should help a lot of the problems that you're going to see in the future. So if you water more deeply, again, run it for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on how your system's set up. Run it for a long period of time so that the water goes in deep. Once it's in there, it will stay there for a long time, especially those of you that have gravel. Generally, most of the houses around here, there's a weed cloth and then the gravel on top of it. That prevents water from evaporating from the soil. Some of you don't dry out for weeks. I'm also the planter here at Waters. I dig in your yards. I know what's going on out there. I'm telling you, that soil is wetter than you think. So water deeply, and then check the soil before you turn it on again, and then you'll get an idea of how long it takes to dry out, and then you can set your system accordingly. And you'll have to change it with the seasons. Hot seasons, of course, you'll need to run more often. I might need it as much as every week. But during cold seasons like this, at the very, very most, every 2 weeks. And that's if you're drying out pretty quick. For some people, they don't even have to turn on their systems at all in the winter. So be very careful with that. If there's water constantly being put on the surface of the soil, it will cause mildew to form and other types of fungus on your plants. That's why I wanted to talk about the watering before the mildew. You'll see a lot of mildew, especially on your roses. They are really prone to mildewing if there's excess moisture on the surface of the soil or if they're not getting enough sunlight. So if you can follow those 2 simple steps, you'll cut out most of your fungal problems. Yes?
Mildew, is that like a white thing on a leaf or?
Yes.
Okay.
Mildew, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, it's a white powdery film on the leaves. It'll look like someone threw some powder on it. It's called powdery mildew, and it's the most common fungus that we see around here. You also see other things like black spot. You'll also see yellowing in the leaves. That's caused by overly frequent water leaching the minerals out of the soil and out of the plant. So that's another thing that you'll see as a sign of overly frequent watering. Doesn't mean that we're getting enough water, it just means we're getting water too frequently. Okay, so if you do have fungus on the plant, maybe it's monsoon season, maybe it's a particularly rainy March. Sometimes the weather fights against you, okay? It'll put a lot of rain, a lot of humidity in the air, and then you have to start fighting with some powdery mildew or fungal spots like black spots and things like that. If that's the case, you can use a fungicide. You just spray it on the leaves, spray it all throughout the plant, and this will kill or suppress fungal spores to keep them from continuing. If you have a problem every year, just do it automatically. Fungicide works so much better as a preventative than as a solution afterward. Once it starts, it's harder to fight. But if you can prevent it, even better. So if you know it's going to happen, say every July, just go out there, spray the whole shrub down with your favorite fungicide. This one right here is copper. This is organic. Generally, if you're going to use this one, you have to use about once a week. Very, very effective, just not very long lasting. If you want something longer lasting, this one's not organic, but this one lasts generally approximately a month. So you don't have to do it as often. That means you're only applying a few times during the monsoon season if we're having one of those long monsoons where it starts in July and continues through September. So this one can make things just a little simpler. It's systemic, which means in this case, you spray it on the leaves actually absorb it into their tissues, and so it doesn't wash off in rain, it doesn't wear off over time, so it takes longer for it to get out of the system. So this one's pretty effective. This one's called Infuse. This is the systemic version. For those of you that do prefer organic, this is just copper, it's emulsified copper. When you, if you open it up and look at it, you'll notice it's actually kind of a greenish blue, just like copper when it's been sitting for a while. It's really copper. Also for insects, mainly aphids. Roses and aphids just go together. They just do. So for that, you'll want to have an insecticide on hand. It's something that, I'm sorry guys, it's hard to prevent aphids. There is only one way to do it, and that's with a systemic insecticide. This right here is, this is a fertilizer for roses with a systemic insecticide mixed in, which means that the plant will actually eat this and absorb it and become toxic from the inside out. Anything that tries to eat it will get the toxin. And so this is the only way that you can actually prevent problems with aphids. But as far as sprays go, aphids it's not so much that they're hard to kill, it's just that there's always aphids in the environment. You kill the ones you have, more fly into your yard. And they breed incredibly fast. It's just amazing. If you ever look up their life cycle, it is just incredible how fast they breed. So if you are using sprays, especially if you're an organic gardener, again, systemics, they're not for organic gardening. You'll want to use, what did I bring up here? You'll want to use the sprays. Okay. Generally, just, there's not so much a certain time frame that you have to spray them, just spray them whenever you see the aphids. Some people will crush them at first or try to wipe them off, and after a while they give up and they go to the spray. So there are some safe sprays that you can use, especially if you want to have something that you can also use on edibles and things. This is the neem oil. Nice thing about neem oil, some of you have used this. Nice thing about neem oil is that, one, it gets a very wide range of insects. Aphids are a little bit tough actually. They're resistant to some insecticides. Neem actually will work on them. This one is organic, and also neem oil is also a fungicide, so you can use this. If you've got this one bottle on hand, you can treat both mildew when it appears and also aphids. This one right here is actually a mixture. Again, if you've used neem oil, you've probably noticed it's a little slow acting on insects. It's effective, but it is slow. This one right here is a mixture of neem and pyrethrin. Pyrethrin is an insecticide, very effective, gets a wide range of insects, faster acting than the neem. And then it also has the neem in there as well, which again acts as a fungicide. So this is organic. Pyrethrin comes from chrysanthemums, And neem comes from neem trees in India, I think. So this is something that's just a natural product. It's called triple action because it's an insecticide, fungicide, miticide. Spider mites are very common here, so that's a good thing. Yes?
Could you use a combination if you've already fed them fertilizer / systemic?
Mhm.
And you're still seeing aphids, could you still use the neem or the triple action?
The question was, if you've already used a systemic and you're still seeing aphids, can you use a spray? Yes, you can still use a spray. Generally, that would only happen temporarily. It'll take a little bit for this to kick in. Once it does, it should take care of all your problems.
When would you apply that, the systemic?
When would you apply that? For the systemic, you have to apply it, I believe it's every 12 weeks? No, every 8 weeks, sorry. Every 2 months for this particular one.
When would you start?
As soon as the roses are needing to be fed and are leafing out and all of that. So basically, as soon as you start to feed for the season, this, both the fertilizer and the systemic in here will last for about 8 weeks in the plant, and then it's going to need food and it's going to need the treatment again. So both of them last about that long. As far as feeding goes, there are some different options. Yes.
Regarding insects, thrips is the biggest bane.
Oh, yes.
Because they get inside the flower and really deform it and ruin it, and you can't get to it
Mhm.
with sprays because it's inside the flower. So what do you recommend for thrips?
She brought up thrip, and goodness gracious, thrip will just drive you crazy. For those of you who are not familiar with thrip are very tiny. Some people can't see them. Some of us can, but you have to really look. Sometimes if you take the rose and slap it on a piece of paper, it'll knock them loose, and then you can see them on the paper. It's harder to see them on the rose. They get into other plants as well, and they'll get into leaf or flower buds, and they'll actually get in between the petals where you can't get to them with the spray, and then they suck the juices out of the edges of the petals, and then when the rose opens up, the edges of the petals look singed. That's that right there is thrip. If you're seeing that, and you know you can't blame the heat, that's thrip. The thrip don't like the heat, so generally they'll disappear when it gets real hot, and then they'll show up again as soon as it cools down a little bit. Since they are in there where they can hide from spray, there's only 2 things you can do. You either need to spray the bud before it cracks open. When it's still tightly closed and the green bracts are still tightly closed, spray it, and then just as it opens, spray it again. That way the thrip try to get into the rose, this kind of acts as a barrier. This is both deadly to them, and also it has a smell they don't like, so it has a repellent action as well. So spraying the buds with this before they get in will help to keep them out. Or you can go with systemic. Again, this depends on whether you're organic or not. The systemic will also work because it makes the plant itself toxic. And then you don't have to be out there trying to get the rose buds before the insects do. And you'll never see the thrip because, like I said, they're very, very, very tiny. Okay. Any more questions about the insects? What did I miss? Yes.
If I start to use the systemic, I've been using your flower powder for fertilizer.
Okay.
So,
You can buy the systemic separately. If you already have a fertilizer that you like, but you want to use the systemic, yes, you can buy them separately.
and that just mix it in?
Yes. Yeah, you don't have to mix it in with the fertilizer. You just, we have some systemic down there that has no fertilizer in it. You just sprinkle it on the soil,
Sprinkle it.
and when you water it, it will
And then
go into the roots.
last year in the spring, I had a dedicated rose garden that I started, and I had aphids, so I came and got your ladybugs.
Okay.
Oh, and that worked just beautifully.
Yes, she brought up the ladybugs, thank you. We do carry ladybugs and praying mantis and sometimes lacewings. Very effective predators if you can keep them in the garden. That's the trick. 'Cause some of you may have tried ladybugs before and you noticed they just fly off into somebody else's yard. So there's a couple of tricks we can go over real quick. They come in April, generally. The ladybugs, if you're gonna go with the ladybugs, everybody likes the ladybugs because they're cute. But if you're gonna get ladybugs, and you probably will if you have kids or grandkids, because they will see them in the garden center and say, "Can we get them, please?" Take them home, and then before you open them, wait till dark to release them. Open up the container, put out some water. Actually, the best thing to do, and this isn't something you want to do regularly, but it would be okay if you do it once, is spray down the plant with water. One, they don't fly at night, so that's why you put them out at night. That way, they have time to kind of just get settled into the environment before, deciding where to go. If you do it in the daytime, you'll open it up and they all just start flying out and crawling out and going everywhere, and just exploring. If you do spray down the water, they're going to be thirsty when they come out. And the first thing they're going to do is go looking for a water source. So make sure there's water there. Spray down the plant. You can even put out a little container of water for them to drink out of. And that way they can satisfy the thirst and not feel the need to go looking for it. So those two tactics help keep the ladybugs where they belong. Personally, I know they're not as cute, but I like to go with either lacewings or praying mantis. The one thing, they don't fly. So they just settle in and stay. The lacewings are very effective when we get them in their eggs. So when they hatch out their larvae, this goes for both lacewings and ladybugs. The larvae actually eat more than the adults do. So they're great to have lacewing larvae in the garden. In the case of the praying mantis, again, they just hatch out and they start crawling around looking for things to eat. So, and they start feeding right away when they hatch. Those two things both come in egg form. The ladybugs will come in already adults. So unless you really want the cute little guys, I actually recommend going with one of the other two. So those two are very effective. I do want to bring up one more kind of insecticide because of the time of year that it is. This is dormant oil. I love this stuff. I really do. This actually is not a toxin. It is a mineral oil which smothers insects and eggs. Because a lot of times eggs are immune to the effects of other insecticides. They don't survive this. Because it is an oil, it is prone to burning in hot weather, so it's not something you can use in the summer, but it's something you can use right now during the dormant season or when they're just coming out of the dormant season. And this will kill eggs before they hatch out and start causing problems. So this, I love this stuff.
What is that called?
This is dormant oil and or horticultural oil. And just super easy to use. Just spray it on everything. Make sure you get a good coating on everything. It just, oh goodness, it solves so many problems. It really, really does. Things that if you're having something that you're having trouble killing with regular insecticide, just go with the dormant. So let's go into fertilizer, and then we'll just be able to answer some questions before you guys go. So fertilizer, basically you want something that's got a nice wide range of minerals and nutrients. And you want to have, in the case of roses, a well-balanced NPK. So we have actually a few different kinds of fertilizers that you can use for roses. This is Fox Farm. Fox Farm is a wonderful organic company that makes a line of products. This one is specifically for roses. We have the systemic, which we've already talked about, the systemic rose care. This, of course, is a food. This one you use every 2 months. Okay? And then also we have the water's all-purpose. Personally, I like to have one fertilizer that works very well for everything, and the water's all-purpose was made specifically for our area. Works wonderfully. I just put this on everything in the ground, everything in the pots, everything. And then for the things that are in the pots, about once a year I'll also supplement with a little bone meal, generally in the fall. Super easy. I don't have to deal with a lot of different fertilizers. Yes?
How often do you feed?
How often do you feed will depend on which fertilizer you picked. Some last longer than others. So if you're using the all-purpose, every 3 months. But if you're using the Happy Frog, I think this one's every 6 to 8 weeks, if I remember. I'd have to look through there. I can't remember. The one for the systemic was every 2 months. If you're using a liquid, liquids do not stay in the soil. It's something that goes in, feeds the roots real quick, and then drains out. So if you're using a liquid that includes solubles, you're going to be using them every 2 to 4 weeks, depending on what you got. This one, generally about every 2-3 weeks, you're going to use this. This is Flower Power 105410. 54 is as high as a number can be for phosphorus. That middle number is for bloom power. Every fertilizer has those 3 numbers. Maybe some of you wondered what that was. That middle number is bloom power. So for roses, if it's a synthetic, you want a high number. Or if they're in a pot, high numbers are important for pots because they don't have the naturally occurring phosphorus in the soil that we have in the ground. Okay. Any questions about the fertilizer? Yes.
Those are fairly low nitrogen numbers. Do you need extra nitrogen, or do you have to apply nitrogen?
So you'll notice if you look, he was wondering why the numbers were so low on this fertilizer. But if you take a look, yeah, you'll notice that the numbers are very different between naturals and synthetics. This is natural. Synthetics are not very efficient. So they tend to have really high numbers like 10, 20, sometimes even as high as 30. In the middle numbers especially, they'll be really high like 54. It's because synthetics just aren't efficient. The naturals, however, work far more efficiently. So they'll have much lower numbers. So you'll look at that and think, oh, that can't do anything. 744 actually is very effective, and it stays in the soil for 3 months. This was formulated specifically for our area. We know what is deficient here. We actually do have some naturally occurring phosphorus and potash in our soil. So you don't need real high numbers in that regard, actually. With the potting soil, if you choose to, you can add a little extra by using superphosphate or bone meal. But as far as in the ground, don't need a whole lot. After something's been planted for a long time in the ground, eventually, yeah, the phosphorus and potash start to deplete. But there's enough in here to keep it replenished. And then the nitrogen 7 actually is just right for natural. It's perfect because we have no naturally occurring nitrogen. Yes?
I have a cactus garden too. Can I use that on cactus?
Can you use this on a cactus garden? Yeah, especially if it's in the ground. Because this doesn't go directly to the root like a synthetic does. It enriches the soil, and then the plant takes what it needs from the soil. So it's not something that's prone to burning.
Yeah, it would be nice to have one fry.
Yes, that's what I love about it.
Do you use time-release fertilizers like Osmocote, or do you use alfalfa plugs or whatever?
The question is, do we use time release? This actually stays in the soil for 3 months. Yeah, and the nice thing about this is it's an all seasons fertilizer. A lot of the national brands that are sold, especially the synthetic stuff, they have one for the spring season and they have one for the fall season. You just have all these different fertilizers and you have to switch back and forth and it gets really confusing. And this one is an all seasons. It just use this quarterly and it will keep the soil enriched so the plants have what they need. Very easy. Usually the only fertilizers that you'll see that last even longer than 3 months are a stake. We don't carry the stakes. Like I said, this is something that we kind of developed ourselves, and it's just a lot of natural stuff. If you open it up, you'll see there's no blue crystals in there. It kind of looks like a mixture of different kinds of dirt and seeds and stuff.
It smells really good.
Yeah, it doesn't smell good. That's how you know it's good.
It works good.
It works very good.
Sheila,
Yes.
in a pot, is that gonna wash through like the liquid, or will it stay?
She was asking, does it wash through in a pot? I found actually it works great in pots. I have a big container garden myself. I grow stuff in the ground and also in containers. I have containers on my patio, and it works great. So no, it doesn't leach out. Yes?
So do you just like, how do you feed? I'm really green on this.
How do you feed?
Yeah.
This one right here?
Yeah, do you scratch around the base of the plant and
I just grab it and toss it like chicken scratch.
on top?
Yeah.
Okay, you don't.
Yeah, some people like to water it in or scratch it in, especially if they have dogs or something. To keep them from licking it up, or maybe if you have high wind. But there's not really any wrong way to do it. Sooner or later, you or the weather is going to water it in. One
To
way
the
or
ground.
another. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not toxic to a dog?
Is it toxic to a dog? Because yes, your dog will eat it.
I have dogs.
Yeah. No, the worst I've ever known to happen, and of course, I can't say I can guarantee it because you never know when a certain dog might have some weird sensitivity or something, but many times we've known dogs to break into this bag and eat it. And the worst I've ever heard of happening so far is the dog throwing up.
Okay.
Vincent, that black lab you saw coming through here earlier, he once got into one of these and he ate quite a bit of it.
Oh.
And so, of course, it was too much for his stomach, and he threw it back up, and then he was fine. So, but that's the worst I've ever heard of happening so far. I would say to keep the carpet clean, and also to keep from wasting product, put this either out of his reach or in a container he can't break into. And also, some dogs like to roll with it too. I mean, it can really turn into a mess. Okay, any other questions?
We'll know about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if you were going to
Yeah,
talk about different
anything.
kinds of roses. I want to know the difference between Floribunda and Grandiflora.
Oh, thank you. So the difference between Floribunda, Grandiflora, Hybrid Tea, basically you have your main categories. You have your climbers, and you have shrub roses, and then you have the hybrid teas, which have the thick canes and big roses on them. They can be basically built into 3 subcategories. You have Grandiflora. Grandifloras tend to grow really tall and have bigger blooms. So think grand, it's a grand size all the way around. The Floribunda, think abundance, Floribunda, they have clusters. The flowers usually aren't very big, but there's a big cluster of flowers on each stem. And then with the hybrid teas, the basic hybrid tea, they're generally around 5 foot tall and have a nice size flower. Not always quite as big as a Grandiflora, but they're a pretty nice size. So, and that's full of flowers. So that's your basic kinds. There are a few other types as well, like the polyanthus, the old world roses. Usually you can tell they're similar to the hybrid teas, but the rose looks different. More of a ruffled look, not a defined center. They don't come out in a spiral like a hybrid tea does. The hybrid tea is the classic florist rose. The old